All right, everybody. Thank you for being here and watching my video on teen depression. So I hope everybody had a good week back from spring break. Today I'm going to be talking about something that I believe we all have pretty extensive experience with, which is teen depression. So I wanted to bring up this topic simply because it is like such a common issue, and I would love to hear more about y'all's experience in internship with it. So to start us off, I've researched some statistics on teen depression. And so these stats that I'm about to share, I'm only going to share two, but they all come from a national survey done from the National Institute of Mental Health. And it was done in 2020, which I thought was really interesting because we kind of captured some COVID influence there. So in 2020, an estimated 2.9 million adolescents between the ages of 12 and 17 in the US had at least one major depressive episode with severe impairment in the past year. So that represents about 12% of the US population from those ages of 12 to 17. And the other one was among adolescents with major depressive episodes of severe impairment. About 46.9% received treatment for their depression within the past year. So something that I found interesting about that statistic was that less than half actually received treatment. And now that I know that we all know that access to mental health care is such a huge barrier, as well as there is some lingering stigma. Here in Wyoming, I know that cowboy mentality is still very prevalent and can inhibit some teens from getting the care that they need. Um, and we're all very aware of the impact that depression can have, and how hard it can make it for people to succeed both in the classroom and their personal life. Those symptoms can be very debilitating. So something that I kind of wanted to focus on too was I found a good article from the Mayo Clinic that outlines all of the symptoms of teen depression specifically. And I wanted to kind of highlight how some of these symptoms of depression can present differently in teens compared to adults. So while adults may tend to show more of the symptoms of like feeling down or feeling sad, teens have a tendency to appear more agitated or irritable. They tend to isolate themselves more, like going up in their rooms and not wanting to talk to anybody. Um, and this can make it a lot more difficult to detect. So, what the Mayo Clinic said was basically it just recommended for parents to look out for changes in behaviors, both in school performance, sleep, other behaviors, and to really like focus on like very noticeable changes. Because sometimes it can appear as, normal teen behavior, spending a lot of time in their rooms and being agitated. But um, as we all know, that there is a big difference in severity and impact on functioning. So, sorry, so that's something that I would definitely take into consideration, especially when you're talking to parents about their child. Um, so, moving on here, the last thing I wanted to touch on is the ethical concern that I identified. So in the ASCA Code of Ethics, section A.1F, it states that school counselors do not diagnose, but instead recognize how a student's diagnosis and environment can potentially affect the student's access, participation, and ability to achieve academic, post-secondary, and social emotional success. So what I found really interesting is how we're prohibited from diagnosing people despite, especially like for us in our program, we have training, we've taken the class on diagnosis, um, and we were able to diagnose in our practicum. So I don't know about y'all, but that was a really interesting thing for me going into internship and not being able to diagnose. And we can absolutely discuss more about the term diagnosis, because as was it was drilled into our heads, diagnosis is not just that DSM label. So it's just interesting that ASCA kind of puts that in there. Just to kind of like start off with this discussion, I would love to hear from you all as to why you think this ethical standard is set, and what are some of the pros and cons to having this standard. I don't know about you, but it's been helpful in some cases to not have that like pressure, especially from insurance, to ascribe a certain label and bring that kind of stigma to my students. Um, And at the same time, some of the students that I work with that have symptoms of, for example, ADHD, it can be hard to advocate for them getting supports that they need in the classroom without a formal diagnosis. And some of those same students don't have a whole lot of access to mental health care, or are really struggling financially, or on a really long wait list to try to get pro bono services. Um, so yeah, it's just very interesting. So that's all that I have for you. So I look forward to hearing more from y'all. All right. Thank you.